Okay, I'm feeling better. I went to bed, I had a sleep, I'm relaxed now, I'm calm, I'm not angry anymore. So, Blade Talk, do you want to take a deep sigh and tell everybody what we're doing today?
So, in this particular episode, I'm calling out the atheists. So, moving on, question number two. This idea that God doesn't exist, did you come up with it using your five senses, right? And if you did, then given that God, by definition, is a spirit, how much sense does it make to decide whether he exists using your five physical senses?
There's so many things wrong with this, the way this question's worded, really. Did I come up with the idea that God doesn't exist using my five senses? It's not even really a question that makes sense. I think I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, when somebody brought the concept of God to me, did I determine that God did not exist using only my five senses? Your version of God never even got to the part where I could consider using my five senses or any other way of measuring the existence of your version of God. You haven't described it in a way that I've even got to that point. The version of God that you consider, I have to default to the Bible version until you describe it yourself. And I can guarantee when you do describe it yourself, it will be different from everybody else's version of God because it is within your head. Some people say things like God is love. Well, God can be love if you want God to be love, and you can call love God. You can say, I'm in God with you as much as you like. That will never give God any kind of will, any kind of intelligence, any kind of mastery or dominion, no creative powers. God is then locked in a box that the rest of the world calls love. Some people say that no, that's just a part of God. God is eternal. Well, then, once again, I submit that God can have no agency, no intelligence, because it's impossible for God to be eternal and also have an intelligence that works. If he's a timeless being, then there's no form of intelligence that works outside of time, is there? Think about it, consider it for a moment. What would that be? It wouldn't be intelligence, because there's no thought process, because there's no time for a thought process to take place. So we haven't got to the point, is what I'm saying, that you've managed to describe this word coherently. And so it doesn't ever get to my five senses, as a child might put it, or my 14 to 20 senses, as the scientists might put it, or just sense, as the rest of the world puts it. Your claim has to be sensible before we can submit it to our senses and determine if it passes the test. I don't even know what your God is. You know? Maybe your version of God is just what everybody else calls birds. I don't know until you say. So if your version of God is birds, then yeah, I can use my five senses to determine that birds exist, you know? But if your version of God is the Christian God, then no, obviously I wouldn't use my five senses. So far, all I've needed is logic. That's all I've got. I've got no scientific background. I've got no religious background, no more than my scientific background. Anyway, I've been educated in both subjects to about a par. And yet, as a layman, it's simple to determine that your God doesn't exist based on the fact simply that he has been defined out of existence. Try it. Describe your God to me. Describe any version of God. And the more descriptive you get, the closer you get to an actual full description, the easier it will be to pick apart. And that is exactly why nobody does it. You just say the word God and assume that everybody knows what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I was born atheist. I was brought up in an atheist community. I wasn't introduced to a Christian community until I turned 11 years old. I went to a Christian school for a year, and I lived in a Christian village for that year. And that was 1 year of my life when everybody around me believed a fairy tale, and I was only just old enough. I wasn't old enough to question it because I knew it wasn't true. So it didn't need questioning. There was one incident long before that when a teacher had tried to convince us that Noah's Ark was real. And again, I scoffed at the concept, but not out loud, to myself, because I'm also aware that the adults, or at least when I was a child, the adults that believed this, I was too young to convince them that they were wrong. I just thought, oh, isn't it sad that these adults believe fairy tales? And I genuinely, to this day, can't distinguish the difference between Jack and the Beanstalk and the Garden of Eden. Tell me the difference. Well, that's enough for question 2. Thank you for sticking around this long. He seems like a nice guy. I overreacted yesterday. I got mad. But yeah, let's hope for some more easy softball questions like this in the future, eh? Because that one was nice.